Hello, this is Cotton Stoops, and today's video is an HTUC video on Akhalos, the second ever roamer to be introduced in a Christmas event in Lumi Legacy. So let's talk about it. From counters and checks and the teammates, to the sets and roles Akhalos can run, as well as its weaknesses and resistances, this video will be teaching you how to use and counter Akhalos. So, what role does Akhalos play is a very essential question in order to know how to use this thing, and its base stats is an easy answer for this. It only has one bad base stat, and that's its range attack of 63. It hits less harder than a Gobidemic, so don't even try and use it. It does have some good range defense and speed. 84 speed does let you outspeed Tyrexes, Valkyries, some Kinebos, and anything lower than that. And range defense of 80, while not being the best on its own, it's definitely really good with its HP stat of 111. This allows Akhalos to be seemingly very bulky and throw out a lot of moves thanks to its 94 energy stat. It does have 120 melee attack, and while it's not the most impressive thing in the world, it's definitely pretty good for any Lumen. So, what role does Akhalos play? It's a wall breaker that is decently fast, and it does have the potential to set up. Using your setup moves like Brawn Boost along with your melee attack, which is already high enough, Akhalos does have the potential to break walls very fast because of its bulk, melee attack, and decent speed tier. So with that out of the way, let's talk about Akhalos' weaknesses and resistances. Akhalos' typing to water and ice is not really the best defensively because it does have 3 resistances to water, air, and typeless. Water is not really a big of a resistance because most water types that are not banned are not really the best offensive wise, and air types like I guess you can count Zeppelin, Wintrix, Stratosaur, and Amare, but only a few of them is being used constantly, so that's not really worth anything. And its typeless resistance is not really worth anything as well because typeless types are not really common. It does have 4 weaknesses to Plant, Electric, Toxic, and Brawler. Plant types are kind of plentiful because Totab is one of those plant types that is really strong in this metagame. Electric types like Phagenot, Zulong, and Halvantic is really common as well. Toxic types like Gobidemic, Barblast, Halvantic. Brawler types like I guess you can only count Your Soul and other Driving Force users are very good against Akhalos, but you do have the potential to hit plant types back super effectively, but that's only for a few stuff. And you do have one major resistance to ice. I don't know why it says major weakness, but you do have one major resistance to ice, which fun fact does let Akhalos switch in on Wintrix a lot of the time, which is pretty good. So with that out of the way, let's talk about Akhalos' set. Akhalos' set will be a wall breaker set because it can utilize setup and is pretty good offensively. Aggressive or Aqua Body will be your main choices for your ability. Aqua Body is a bit more pretty play, I'm pretty sure. So if you are not pretty free to play, then you can run aggressive, but Aqua Body is okay. Personality will be Brawny, and of course you can run clumsy with this, but just for the long run, Brawny will be the better one because you can potentially run some mixed Akhalos sets, which I'll be talking about later. Power Cuffs will be your main item. You could of course run shells or essences, but this set will be utilizing the Power Cuffs. Ice Hammer and Aqua Jaws will be your main 2 moves. You can of course run Hydro Slash over Aqua Jaws for the crit chance and 100% accuracy, so you can do that as well. And Brawn Boost will be your main setup move. The reason why we're running Body Slam here is because Driving Force, unless you're using it to predict a switch, then it's not going to be helping you a lot because you're going to be getting hit first, and that's not really the best because you can just go into another Lumen that threatens that Lumen out, so you don't have to take a hit and then force them to switch. You can generally be good for most situations, but because this is a wall breaker set, you want to run Body Slam. And finally, the TPs, 20 energy will let you use 1 Hydro Slash, 3 Ice Hammers, and 1 Brawn Boost. 80 HP's leftovers, and 200 melee attack and speed is to, of course, max out your best stats. You can drop some speed into the HP if you want to tank some bit and save some speed, but overall 200 speed is probably going to be the best in the long run because your speed tier is pretty competitive, so you might as well try and compete for all of them. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the counters and checks as well as Akhalos' teammates. Defensive counters and checks to Akhalos is pretty simple. You just want to run stuff that can resist it, like water types and ice types. Now, unless you're not running Driving Force, that means Thunderland is going to be your best bet 9 times out of 10. If it clicks Driving Force on you for the switch, then that just sucks. But if it does choose to stay in and click Driving Force, that means you'll be hitting it with Body Crash first. And most likely, if they do not set a Brawn Boost on the switch, they will be hitting you for a +1 resilience, which is that's pretty good. So yeah. Obsidian is also a pretty good option if you do not want to run bulky waters, mainly because it does have Body Crash and resilience. Just be careful that you might get broken through if you are not that consistent with your Obsidian switching, because you do not have consistent recovery. And 3 bulky waters is pretty good because it does resist both of Thunderland's stabs. Barblast is pretty good, Luminami is pretty good, and Fiskarna has been rising in usage lately, mainly because of its defensive utility and the utility-based stuff it can provide. Its defensive counters and checks, or offensive ones, is Ikizune, C.B.O, Baneki, Zulong, Halvantic, and Tatab. Zulong and Halvantic are pretty good. You just want to run stuff that can hit it super effectively and outspeed it. So most of these guys are pretty good. You can also run some other stuff like Pertagon and Hunter, as well as some other stuff like a Volcaloa, which is pretty good. Akhalos, since it is getting hit super effectively by most of the common typings, you generally do not have to be worried about revenge killing it. All you have to do is run a defensive bulky water type or a Obsidian or Thunderland, then you're pretty much safe from a Akhalos. It's just that simple. And defensive teammates for Akhalos is also simple. You just want to run stuff that can resist its weaknesses and pair up very well with each other. Usually using the very good meta team comps or the meta defensive cores are going to be great for Akhalos, because generally Akhalos has a lot of weaknesses, so you're going to want to pair it with good defensive meta cores. You don't have to, but it's generally a good idea. You can also pair Akhalos with some other pivots like a Urusnack or an Amare, which is pretty good for some potential, because Akhalos, while it does have some good bulk, it doesn't want to be switching in a lot of the time. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the conclusion and my thoughts on Akhalos. Offensive teammates for an Akhalos is pretty simple. You just want to run stuff that can hit the bulky water super effectively, as well as deal with the ice types. Tatab, Ikizune, Halvantic, Phagenot, and Zulong are going to be great options for this. Vespratu is also a pretty good option because usually you do not want to switch in on brawler moves, and Vespratu just so happens to be one of the best Lumians for absorbing brawler type moves and the coverage that goes along with that. Vespratu also does provide some great offensive and defensive utility, which is pretty good. And if you do want to run a Barbs team with Akhalos, Gobdemic is of course going to be your main staple. So Akhalos seems to be a pretty decent Lumian. In my opinion, Akhalos is probably still the worst quote-unquote roamer to date. Unlike other roamers, it does not have a good niche that is worth using. Most of the time, Akhalos is really bad because it does not have enough coverage to hit the bulky waters or ice types that it cannot hit. It did get a buff in Driving Force, but other than that, it's not going to be helping Akhalos a lot. If it did get like a 90 base power brawler move, then maybe we're talking, because then Thunderland won't be a safe answer anymore, and other metal types, which is pretty good for Akhalos. So yeah, like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you want to see more. This is Kinda Stoops telling you that Zulong is still a dumpster fire. At least it's not Akhalos.